The first thing I heard was the alarm. It was a thin, shrieking sound, the kind that cuts straight through your skull and makes your heart punch against your ribs before your brain even has time to catch up. I had just set my purse down on the kitchen table when I noticed the plain brown parcel sitting on my front porch through the glass of the storm door. There was no return address, no postage sticker, no handwritten note tucked under the twine. Just my name, written in black marker across the top in a shaking hand I knew too well. My father's hand. I told myself I was imagining it. I even laughed once, quietly, because grief does strange things to you. My dad had been dead for 3 months. Dead, buried, and reduced to the kind of silence that follows you around the house at night. But when I opened the door, the box was really there, sitting on the welcome mat like it had been placed there 5 minutes earlier. And the second I cut through the tape, something inside it began screaming. Not metaphorically, not in my head. A literal, high-pitched alarm burst out so loud I dropped the box and stumbled backward, my hand flying to my chest. The little porch light flickered over the cardboard as it tilted on its side, and for one insane second I thought I was about to watch it explode. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911 before I had even fully stood up. "I need the police," I said, barely able to get the words out over the shriek. "There's a suspicious package on my porch. It's making a noise. I think something might be wrong." The dispatcher asked my address, asked if anyone else was in the house, asked if I had touched anything inside. I told her I'd opened it and that there was some kind of alarm device inside. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to another woman standing inside my life. 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up so fast their tires crunched over the curb. A third vehicle arrived after that, unmarked, and a woman in a dark blazer stepped out with the calm, sharp eyes of someone who had seen too much to be easily rattled. Her name was Detective Lena Alvarez, and I would remember the exact moment she bent down beside my fallen package and said, "You did the right thing calling us." The alarm inside the box finally died after a few seconds, as if it had completed its job and no longer cared what happened next. Detective Alvarez crouched beside it with gloves on, carefully lifting the lid the rest of the way. Inside was not a bomb, thank God. Not even close. There was an old silver pocket watch wrapped in a washcloth. My father's watch, the one he used to tap against the side of his coffee mug when he was impatient. There was a key taped to a folded envelope, and there was a black thumb drive sealed in a clear plastic bag. That was all, except the envelope had my name on it again in that same uneven handwriting, and when Detective Alvarez handed it to me, my hands started shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a single note. "If you are reading this, then they already started lying. Trust no one in the family. Call Detective Alvarez immediately. Go to locker 114 at Lakeside Storage." And for the first time in 3 months, I felt the cold weight of my father's absence turn into something else. Fear. Real, living fear. Because my father had not been the kind of man to leave notes like that, unless something was very, very wrong. My name is Mara Bennett, and until that moment, I had spent most of my life believing that my family was ordinary in the boring Midwestern way. We weren't rich. We weren't glamorous. We lived outside Columbus, Ohio, in a house with creaky floors and a maple tree in the front yard that shed half its leaves into the gutters every October. My father, Walter Bennett, owned Bennett Hardware for 32 years. My mother died when I was 16, and after that, the store and the house and the rhythm of our lives all seemed to revolve around my father's stubborn insistence that we keep going. My younger brother, Trent, was 7 years younger than me, and had always been the kind of boy who could charm a room with a smile and empty it with a lie. When we were kids, he was the one who forgot birthdays and broke things and swore it was an accident. When he grew older, he became the sort of man who never seemed to be in the wrong long enough to learn from it. He could sell you a promise and make you thank him for the privilege. I had been the one who stayed. When Dad had his first stroke, I was the one who drove down from Cincinnati to help. When he couldn't remember his medications, I was the one who set alarms on his phone. When the left side of his body got weak and his speech thickened and the doctors said the recovery would be slow, I quit my job teaching art at a middle school and moved back into my childhood bedroom. Trent said he would help, but help, in his world, meant stopping by once a week with a paper cup of coffee and a complaint about traffic. After Dad got worse, Trent got louder. He started talking about practical decisions and financial reality and not letting sentiment ruin what Dad built. Then Dad died. A heart attack in his sleep, the coroner said. Natural causes, the doctor said. A blessing, Trent said at the funeral, while our cousins clutched tissue and his wife, Brooke, dabbed at her eyes like she was mourning a country she'd never visited. And I, still raw from the weeks that followed, had believed that grief was the worst thing I would have to survive. I was wrong. Detective Alvarez looked at the note in my hand, then at me. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I told her about my father's stroke, about Trent's new construction business that somehow always seemed to need more money than it made, about Brooke's perfect hair and expensive shoes, and the way she always smiled as if she were in on a joke no one else was clever enough to understand. I told her about the sudden push to sell the house after the funeral, the conversations Trent had started having with me about freeing up the assets, the way he'd cornered me in the kitchen and said, "You really don't want to spend the next 10 years babysitting a dead man's store, do you?" He had said it like it was concern. It had felt like a threat. The detective listened without interrupting. Then she asked me one question that made the skin on the back of my neck tighten. Did your father ever say he was afraid of your brother? I hesitated. Not in those words. Did he ever say anything about pressure, documents, signatures? I thought about the last month of his life, about how confused he had been some days, and how fiercely alert he had been on others. About the week, Trent had taken him to a specialist appointment, and returned with a stack of papers he said were routine updates for the store's accounts. My throat tightened. He asked me once if I ever saw him sign anything when he was tired, I said. Detective Alvarez nodded, as if that answered more than I realized. Within an hour, she and 2 officers were in my car with me, driving to Lakeside Storage on the north side of town. My pulse thudded the whole way there. The box sat in a sealed evidence bag on the back seat between us, like a live thing, and I kept looking at it as if it might start speaking on its own. Lakeside Storage was one of those places off a highway exit that no one notices until they need it. Chain-link fences, security cameras, a faded sign with a broken letter. It smelled like old dust and wet concrete. The manager, a thin man with a nervous mustache, looked up sharply when Detective Alvarez asked for locker 114. His face changed before he even answered. That one was rented by Walter Bennett, he said slowly. My father had rented a storage locker. No, I said, more to myself than to anyone else. He never said anything about that. The manager glanced at the detective, then back at me. Your brother was here 3 days ago, he said. I felt the blood leave my face. Trent? I asked. He nodded. He said he was collecting family property. The detective's eyes sharpened. Did he take anything? The manager swallowed. He was in a hurry. I didn't see everything. Detective Alvarez produced identification and had the lock cut. When the door rolled up, the stale air inside rushed out in a cloud of dust and something sharper, like old paper and engine oil. The locker was packed floor to ceiling. There were cardboard boxes labeled in my father's square block letters. There was a metal cash box, a duffel bag, 3 binders, and a stack of folders tied with string. On top of one box sat my father's old work shirt, folded carefully. I touched the fabric and felt my knees nearly give out. He had been here. Not physically, maybe, but his hands had arranged these things. His mind had decided what to keep and what to hide. Detective Alvarez opened the cash box first. Inside were bank statements, handwritten notes, and a folder marked taxes. Then she opened the binders. Neither of us spoke for a long moment after that, because tucked inside the first binder were copies of bank transfers, scanned checks, and what looked like altered signatures. The second binder held an email chain between my father and his accountant. The third binder had photographs of Trent, at my father's desk, near his filing cabinet, in the store office while Dad slept in his recliner at the back, his head tipped forward, and his mouth open because of the stroke medication. The detective turned another page and stopped. "This," she said quietly, "is not just family conflict." I stared at the papers until the words blurred. There were records showing that over the last 10 months of my father's life, nearly $90,000 had been moved out of his business accounts. There were forged authorizations for a business loan I had never heard of. There was a deed transfer on our family house, dated 6 weeks before Dad died, naming Trent and Brooke as joint beneficiaries of the property if the estate was challenged. And there, at the bottom of the page, was my brother's signature, or what was supposed to be his signature. The detective looked up at me. "Did your father have a lawyer?" "Yes," I whispered. "Mr. Halpern. He handled everything when my mom died, too. Then we're calling him." Back in the parking lot, while Detective Alvarez made the call, I sat on the tailgate of my car and tried not to throw up. Every memory I had of the last year came back in broken pieces. Trent showing up with a grin and saying Dad needed to trust the family. Brooke suggesting Dad should simplify his life. Trent insisting the store had become a burden. Brooke telling me I was being selfish because I didn't want to sell the house. Selfish. That word kept echoing in my skull. The estate had barely been in probate 2 weeks when they started pressuring me. Dad's will, the one everyone had seen, left the business and house to both of us equally. At first glance, that seemed fair. In practice, it meant Trent could force a sale if I refused to cooperate, and he knew I couldn't afford to buy him out. I had considered it a betrayal of everything Dad had built, but I had also told myself maybe Trent was right. Maybe I was the one clinging too hard. Now I understood the game. He had not been trying to save the family property. He had been trying to steal it without making it look like theft. Mr. Halpern arrived an hour later, old and broad-shouldered and looking like he had just stepped out of another decade. He sat with us in a conference room at the storage facility office and listened as Detective Alvarez laid out what had been found. The lawyer's face grew harder with every page. "I warned Walter," he said finally. "I told him he was too trusting." My mouth felt dry. "He knew?" Halpern exhaled through his nose. He suspected. He didn't know how much. He said Trent had been bringing papers to the house when he was on pain medication. Said Brooke always seemed to be present whenever decisions needed signing. The room went quiet. Then he reached into his briefcase and drew out a sealed envelope. "Your father gave me this 6 months ago," he said. "He told me to keep it until after his death, unless he asked for it sooner. He said if anything happened to him and if you came to me first, I was to give it to you." My hands were trembling so much I could barely open it. Inside was another letter, folded 4 times and written in my father's hand. "Mara," it began. "If you are reading this, then I was right to be afraid, and I am sorry for that." My chest tightened so hard I had to stop and breathe before continuing. "I have been making mistakes for a long time. I trusted the wrong person. I made excuses because I wanted to believe my son was better than the man he was becoming. I thought I could protect the family by keeping the peace. Instead, I gave him room to do damage. If you are with Detective Alvarez, tell her everything. She is honest. She will help you. There is a second key in the watch box. It opens the safe deposit locker at First National. I should have told you sooner. Please forgive me for not being braver." I read the letter twice, then a third time, because my brain refused to accept that the man who had taught me how to ride a bike, how to change a flat tire, how to stand up straight when people tried to make me small, had spent his final months frightened and ashamed. I pressed the paper to my lips before I knew I was doing it. Detective Alvarez put a hand on my shoulder, and for the first time since my father's funeral, I cried like a child. The safe deposit box at First National contained the rest. Inside was an updated will, notarized and dated the day before my father had the final heart attack. It named me as sole executor of the estate and sole owner of Bennett Hardware, with instructions to keep the business open for at least 5 years if financially possible. There was also a handwritten memo from Dad explaining why he had never told Trent. Because if Trent knew he was being cut out, he would have destroyed everything first. Under the will was a USB drive and a small cassette tape player, of all things, with a note that made my hands go cold again. Listen to this with someone you trust. The attorney's office had a tape recorder from the 1990s. It still worked. We played the tape there, all of us crowded around the table. My father's voice crackled through the speakers, softer than I remembered, but unmistakable. "If this is being heard," he said, "then I did not manage to stop what was happening in time. I have signed things I should not have signed. I have been tired and confused and foolish. Trent told me the loan would help the store. He told me Brooke had already arranged the paperwork. I believed him because I wanted to believe my boy could still do one decent thing." There was a pause, a faint cough. "I don't know everything he's done," my father continued, "but I know enough. I know he's taken money meant for taxes. I know he tried to get me to sell the property to cover debts I didn't create. I know he's been speaking to a developer behind my back. If Mara is hearing this, I want her to know I am proud of her. I should have said it more. I should have thanked her more. I was a stubborn man, and not a good one in the ways that mattered." I stopped breathing. On the tape, my father let out a shaky exhale. "If Trent is listening to this one day, I hope he understands something. I loved him too. That is the tragedy. I loved him, and he spent that love like a credit card, with no limit." Silence filled the room after the tape ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Detective Alvarez closed the recorder and said, "We have enough for warrants." By nightfall, the whole shape of my life had changed. The police froze the business accounts. The bank flagged the forged transfers. The county attorney's office opened a criminal investigation into elder financial exploitation, fraud, forgery, and unlawful transfer of property. Mr. Halpern filed emergency motions in probate court. The house and store were locked down before Trent even knew what was happening. That should have been enough, but my brother had never been good at accepting consequences. He showed up at my house at 11:40 that night, pounding on the door so hard the frame rattled. I saw him through the peephole first, red-faced and furious in a wrinkled dress shirt, his tie hanging loose like he had been running. I opened the door only because Detective Alvarez had told me not to be alone if he came. Trent stepped inside the moment I cracked it open, then froze when he saw the detective standing in my hallway. His expression changed fast. "Are you serious?" he snapped, pointing at me. "You called the cops on your own brother?" "Sit down," Detective Alvarez said. "Don't tell me what to do in my own family's house," he shot back, and then he seemed to realize exactly what he'd said. My stomach dropped. "In your family's house?" I repeated. "Trent, what did you do?" He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "What do you think I did? I tried to keep us from losing everything. Dad was falling apart. The business was drowning. I stepped up while you played martyr. By forging signatures?" I said. His face twitched. Detective Alvarez slid a folder onto the kitchen table. "We have bank records, loan documents, security footage, and a recorded statement from your father." The color drained from Trent's face. For the first time since I was a kid, he looked young. Not charming, not clever, just cornered. "That old man didn't know what he was doing," he said, and the words came out sharper than he probably meant them to. "He was sick. He was miserable. He didn't understand what was happening. Brooke and I were trying to save the business." "By taking it," I said. "He was going to lose it anyway," Trent barked. "You think sentiment pays taxes? You think that store survives on memories? We had real debt, Mara. Real debt." And he refused to let go. My hands curled into fists. "So you stole from him." His jaw hardened. "I borrowed from your dying father." He looked away for half a second, and in that half second I saw the truth. Not just greed, panic, desperation, and underneath that, something uglier. Entitlement. He had convinced himself that because he wanted something badly enough, he had a right to it. "You always got to be the good one," he said, voice rising. "The responsible one. The one Dad trusted. I was the screw-up, right? That's what everyone said. So maybe I got tired of being treated like I was already guilty. I stared at him. There it was. The oldest wound in the room, dressed up as an excuse. Dad had made mistakes with Trent. There was no point pretending otherwise. He had covered for him too often, rescued him too easily, lowered the consequences because he wanted to be fair. But none of that gave Trent the right to bleed our father dry. You could have come to me, I said quietly. You could have told me the truth. He let out a bitter laugh. And then what? You'd tell me to sell the house and go get a real job? Maybe. The silence after that was brutal. Then he said, Brooke knows where the money went. Of all the things he could have said, that was the one that shifted the air in the room. I looked at him sharply. What? He rubbed a hand over his face, suddenly looking older. She set up the loan contacts. She said the cash flow would stabilize. She said she had a buyer lined up for the property if it came to that. She told me Dad was too stubborn to see the future. Detective Alvarez's expression didn't change, but I saw the slight tightening around her eyes. You were saying your wife was involved in the fraud? Trent swallowed. I'm saying she knew more than she admitted. His phone buzzed in his pocket then, and when he looked at the screen, his expression went blank in a way that chilled me. Who is it? I asked. He didn't answer. The phone buzzed again. He finally pulled it out, glanced at it, and turned the screen toward us. Brooke. The detective held out her hand. Put it on speaker. Trent hesitated. Then he answered. Where are you? Brooke's voice snapped through the speaker, hard and annoyed. The bank called me. What did you do? Trent looked at the detective like a trapped animal. Brooke, he said, and his voice was suddenly smaller. Where did the money go? A pause. Then her voice changed. Not panicked. Not defensive. Cold. You talked, she said. My skin went numb. Detective Alvarez took a step closer. This is Detective Alvarez. Brooke, I'm advising you to remain on the line. A sharp inhale came through the phone. Then Brooke laughed, and it was the most terrible sound I had ever heard. Oh, she said. So that's how this is going. The line went quiet for a beat. Then she said, Trent, you idiot. He closed his eyes. Excuse me? He said. You were supposed to hold the property until the refinancing cleared, she said. That's all. That's what we agreed. If your father had just signed the transfer, we'd have been fine. Agreed? Trent repeated, almost choking on the word. You told me it was temporary. It was temporary, she snapped. Until you started getting sentimental about the store. I warned you not to get attached to things you can't manage. The room went still. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Detective Alvarez motioned sharply for silence, and I realized she was recording the call. Brooke continued, and every word she said seemed to peel back another layer of the lie. She had been working with a developer who wanted the land under Bennett Hardware. The store was old, the lot was valuable, and the house next door made the whole property much more lucrative. Trent, already behind on loans, had signed papers he barely read because Brooke told him it was a short-term restructuring plan. It had never been short-term. It had been a handoff. When the money from the business accounts disappeared, Brooke had funneled it through shell invoices and one of her cousin's consulting companies. The forged deed had been her idea. The medical appointment they took Dad to 6 months before he died? That was when they had tried to get him to sign additional estate papers while he was sedated and confused from a new prescription. My brother had helped. Maybe not with the same intention Brooke had, but help was help. And when he finally realized she had no intention of saving him, he had gone looking for a way out. That was when Dad's package made sense. Not all of it, but enough. The storage locker had been a trap, set by my father in the one way he could manage in the end. He had gathered the evidence when he still could. He had enlisted Mr. Halpern. He had likely guessed that if he left the truth in my hands, Trent would either lie harder or come apart under pressure. He had been right. Brooke's voice came back to us one last time, icy and controlled. Tell Mara she can have the business if she wants it. It's going to collapse without the refinancing anyway. Let her keep the broken toy. You can always start over. Then the line clicked dead. Trent lowered the phone slowly. For a moment, I thought he might lunge, or cry, or collapse. Instead, he sat down at my kitchen table and put both hands over his face. "I didn't know she was doing all that," he said. The detective's voice was flat. "You knew enough." He said nothing. That was the closest thing to a confession he had in him. The arrests took place the next morning. Brooke was pulled over on the highway while she was trying to leave town with a packed suitcase and $10,000 in cash in the trunk of her Lexus. The developer she had been working with was implicated within 48 hours. Trent was charged first as a co-conspirator, then separately when forensic accountants traced his signatures on 3 of the most damaging documents. The county prosecutor called it an organized effort to exploit an elderly relative for financial gain. The newspapers called it a family scandal. To me, it felt like watching a rot I had ignored for years finally split open in the sun. There were hearings. More hearings. I sat in probate court with my father's watch in my coat pocket, holding on to it like a talisman. Trent looked thinner every time I saw him. Brooke did not look embarrassed. That was the part that made me understand her most clearly. Embarrassment requires a conscience. What she had was a strategy. At the first settlement conference, her attorney tried to argue that she had merely acted on bad advice from her husband. Mr. Halpern responded by placing a printed transcript of her phone call on the table and asking if the court would like to hear the part where she called my father a broken toy. The room went silent. The judge did not smile. Brooke did not apologize. Her face only went tighter and harder, like granite under pressure. Trent, on the other hand, did something I did not expect. He broke. It happened after the judge denied his request for release on bond, pending further review. He turned to look at me, and for the first time in our lives, I did not see him performing anything at all. No sarcasm, no charm, no angle, just fear. "Mara," he said, voice rough, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at him for a long moment. Then I said, "That's the problem. You never mean for anything to go this far. You just keep going until somebody stops you." His face crumpled. I should tell you I felt triumphant then. I should tell you I enjoyed watching him fall apart. But the truth is uglier and harder. I felt grief. Not for what he had become, because that had been happening for years, little by little, in ways I had tried not to notice. I felt grief for the brother I used to know, the one who taught me how to throw a baseball in the backyard when we were kids, the one who cried the day our mother died and let me sleep on the floor beside his bed because I was too scared to be alone, the one who had once defended me from a boy at school by punching him square in the mouth. That boy was in there somewhere, buried under debt and pride and poor choices and a marriage that had turned toxic and greedy and cruel. But buried is not the same as gone. "Why didn't you stop?" I asked him, my voice lower now. He shook his head, looking at the table. "Because every time I tried to step back, she told me I'd lose everything, and she was always louder than my conscience." The answer didn't excuse him. It just made him human enough to hurt over. The judge eventually accepted a plea arrangement that came with prison time, restitution, and permanent financial supervision after release. Brooke fought every inch of her case and ended up with a longer sentence than Trent because her role was cleaner, colder, and more deliberate. The developer backed away, then got dragged back in once the money trail became impossible to hide. The property liens were reversed. The business accounts were restored. Bennett Hardware was still standing when I unlocked the front door 6 weeks later. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Wood dust, motor oil, old cardboard, Dad's place. I stood in the quiet store aisle and cried so hard I had to sit down on an upside-down 5-gallon bucket near the paint counter. Sunlight came through the front windows in long, pale lines, catching on the rows of screws and hinges and hand tools that had outlived 3 decades of seasons and one man's stubborn heart. The place was not a money machine. It was not glamorous. It would never be the kind of business people bragged about on social media. But it mattered. It was where old men came to talk about leaky faucets. It was where mothers bought picture hooks and extension cords and the kind of glue that saves a broken lamp or a broken chair or a broken day. It was where my father had built a life out of being useful. I understood then why he had fought so hard. Not because he loved the store more than his children, because he had built something that gave his life shape, and because, in the end, he had wanted to leave me more than property. He wanted to leave me proof that what he had seen in me was real. I made changes after that. I hired 2 part-time employees who knew the business better than I did. I updated the website. I got rid of the dead inventory and brought in the things people actually needed. I started a small community tool lending shelf in the back with free repairs on Saturdays for seniors. When the county offered to buy the property at a discount after the scandal, I refused. Instead, I kept it open, not because I was trying to prove anything, because I finally understood that keeping something alive can be its own kind of justice. As for Trent, he wrote to me from county jail after 4 months. I almost threw the letter away unopened. I didn't. He apologized in it, awkwardly and badly at first, the way people do when they've spent too long thinking guilt can be managed like paperwork. Then, in the middle of the second page, he stopped trying to sound smart and just sounded broken. Dad was right, he wrote. I spent love like it was unlimited. I read that line 3 times. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness. He said he knew he didn't deserve it. He said he had finally started reading the letters Dad left behind in the file his attorney sent him. He said he had never realized how much Dad saw, how much Dad feared, how much Dad still hoped he could come back from himself. I did not go visit him. Not right away. Maybe not ever in the way he wanted. But I did send one reply. I told him that if he truly wanted to honor Dad, he should spend the rest of his sentence learning how to be honest, even when it costs him something. I told him redemption isn't a feeling, it's a pattern. And I told him that our father's greatest mistake was believing love alone could save someone from their own choices. That letter was the last meaningful thing I sent him for a long time. A year passed, then another. The store stabilized. The case against Brooke dragged on, as cases like hers often do, with appeals and motions and papers that made time feel sticky and slow. But the outcome never changed. Evidence is stubborn. Lies are only powerful until someone opens the right box and the alarm starts screaming. I kept my father's watch in the office drawer for months before I finally fixed it. It had stopped sometime before he died. The little spring inside was jammed with dust. When the jeweler handed it back to me, ticking again, I stood outside the shop in the parking lot and listened to it through my fingertips. That sound, small, steady, alive, felt like a blessing. Sometimes, late in the evenings, after I've locked the front door and turned off the lights, I still stand behind the counter and look at the old framed photograph of Dad hanging near the register. He's in it with his sleeves rolled up, one hand on a stack of lumber, smiling like he already knows something the rest of us are still too young to understand. I used to think the story ended the day he died. It didn't. It ended the day I opened that parcel, the day the alarm rang, the day the truth crawled out of the dark and sat on my porch in a plain brown box. My father was gone, but his final act was not just revenge. It was not just a trap for the people who had betrayed him. It was a last, stubborn gift to the daughter who had stayed when things got hard. He gave me the evidence, yes. He gave me justice. He gave me the chance to protect what he built. But more than that, he gave me permission to stop apologizing for being the one who cared. And my brother? He lost the house. He lost the business. He lost the life he thought he could steal without consequence. Brooke lost everything she had tried to hide behind polish and control. They both learned, the hard way, that greed is loud for a while but never permanent. Meanwhile, I got something better than inheritance. I got clarity, and I got the quiet, satisfying knowledge that when the truth finally came knocking, it did not come softly. It came with an alarm so loud that even a broken family could not ignore it.